and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for My Bloody Valentine, made in 1981, directed by George Mihalka, and written by Stephen A. Miller and John Beard.
My Bloody Valentine takes place in the Canadian province of Nova Scotia, where on one Valentine's Day, a miner named Harry Warden was trapped in a mine for several days. After he found out that the supervisors left to attend the Valentine's Day dance, he sought out revenge and killed the two supervisors in cold blood. Now, Harry is back in town, and if the town plans another dance, he promises that he will kill again.
This is one of the many slasher movies that were created in the 80s slasher craze. Some of you may have seen it, but if not, this spoiler warning is for you, as we will be going into spoiler territory from here on out. If you want to experience the movie with our drinking rules, they will be posted on screen now for your enjoyment. Now on to the rest of the video, starting with the rules.
Well, kicking off every drinking rule list that we make is death. Whenever you see a death, you drink. And that came to a total of 14 in this movie.
Yeah, and there was some pretty gruesome deaths in this movie. Obviously, it's kind of what you would come to expect with a slasher movie at this point, especially from the 80s. That's what they were going for.
Yeah.
One way to kind of tell that there was going to be a death scene coming up was there was almost a grainy filter on it. And I don't know if that was done intentionally, but it could have been because there was backlash because John Lennon had just died around
that was
time.
Actually the exact reason.
Oh, it was the reason?
So they cut out a good, maybe 5 minutes. Maybe it was even more, but they cut out a good chunk of the movie that was a lot of gruesome scenes.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm not sure if it was re-added or re-edited later on, but...
Oh, and that's why it's grainy.
Yeah, and that's why it's grainy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that explains a lot then. Because, I was wondering why a lot of the film was grainy, and that explains it.
Let's move on to some of the notable deaths in their grainy perfection that they are. Obviously, there's a pickaxe that goes right through his jaw and out the eye.
Pops his eye right out. Yeah, that was a cool death. That was probably my favorite death in the movie.
Oh yeah. No, I think that was... I feel unrealistic, but so great.
And then there was the death where, the was it Mabel, I think her name was?
Mabel was her
Mabel,
name, yeah.
She was burned through in the dryer, I should say. Mm-hmm. And that was another pretty gruesome death.
My favorite thing about that scene is just a quick side note is how all the hearts were turned upside down.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of just a typical Conjuring movie when the devil's near or whatever, the cross is turned inverted. I just thought it was something fucking funny in the movie.
And just one last thing to point out about the deaths is this came out in 1981, which was the same year that Halloween 2 came out. And I'm not sure if it was intentional or not. I feel like it wasn't intentional being released in the same year. But who knows? Anyways, the scene in Halloween 2 where she's basically burned alive in the hot tub, mm-hmm. The scene in this one where his face gets melted off from a boiling pot of water, gets dunked down into it, it really reminded me of Halloween 2. Yeah. And again, I don't know if it was intentional or not. It could have been, but it could just be a coincidence.
Well, I think Halloween 2 was made after. It must have been, right?
Just I guess if this is a Valentine's movie, you would think.
I think it was.
Yeah,
I think this was made before.
Maybe Halloween even ripped this one off.
Yeah.
Who knows? Either way, it was just a funny coincidence that two slashers in 1981 had a very, very similar death.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll move on to rule number 2 now, which of course is screams, cries, or yells if you hear when you take a sip. And this one gave us 23 sips. Not much else to say on this, so I'll let you on to the next rule.
Yeah. What's new about this movie? It's a Valentine's Day movie, so whenever Valentine's is said or in text, you take a sip, which came to a total of 18.
Yeah, and another pretty straightforward rule. We don't have to go into any details about it. Just happens a pretty good amount of times.
Yeah.
Your decorating committee has done one hell of a job.
Well, after all, the first Valentine's dance in 20 years has to be something special.
Anyways, moving on to rule number 4, it's whenever the dance is mentioned. This rule gave us 9 sips.
Yep, and I don't think I've ever seen so many people that are over the age of 20 excited for a Valentine's Day dance.
Not in this day and age, but I feel like back then dances were a lot more popular. People would go to the dance on the weekend and stuff, and it's probably a lot more normal than we think it is. Just on our time right now, nobody's getting pumped up for a dance like this.
Yeah.
I feel like it was a lot more prevalent back then.
Now let's move on to rule number 5, which is whenever TJ being gone or coming back is mentioned, and that was only mentioned a total of 5 times.
He didn't sound like my own man.
Too bad, man. Look, you left. You went away, and we didn't know where you were or when the hell you were coming back.
And it's kind of the main underlying story of the film in a way. Like, I guess it's a side plot in the film, the love triangle that's going on between TJ, Axel, and their girlfriend. I forget her name.
Yeah, I don't remember either. Don't feel bad.
Anyways, there's a love triangle between them going on, and this is kind of thing that triggered that in the beginning because he left town and then he eventually came back. But at that point, Axel had just, I guess, taken her from him in a sense. But yeah, that's all there is to say about that. So we'll move on to rule number 6, which is whenever you see Harry Warden, which gave us 9 sips.
And I guess it's fair to mention that we'll say whenever you see the miner or the killer, which is Axel. So we can't really say Harry Warden, but we don't want to spoil it for people. So whenever you see Harry Warden,
we don't want to spoil it, even though we just said it's Axel.
And for the people reading the rules,
we're in spoiler territory now, which is why we're saying it is Axel. But we wanted the rules to kind of be as spoiler free, just if you read it at a glance like we do in the beginning.
I guess adding on to that, I don't really know why Axel was the killer. Like, he was upset about the dance because his dad was killed during a dance, and then Harry Warden killed his dad. I don't know. I feel like that was just weird. It didn't seem like a right fit.
I don't know. I got it. Like, they obviously had the red herring, I guess you'd call it, with TJ. Throughout the whole film, I thought he was going to be revealed that he was the killer.
Yeah.
But then it ended up being Axel, and once you learn that his dad was killed from Harry Warden, it's almost like he wants to get revenge for his dad's death. So I could kind of get it. It may have been a bit of a stretch, like people probably wouldn't have gone out and do that in most cases, but I could understand it a little bit, and I wasn't mad or disappointed by any means. But I do agree that the reveal for this did kind of come out of nowhere. Yeah. They could have, built it up or slowly revealed it a little bit more rather than just, coming out of nowhere and saying it. I do agree with that point.
Anyways, let's move on to the next rule. The next rule is whenever the love triangle is mentioned, you take a sip.
Yeah, and this one happened 5 times. We mentioned the love triangle with TJ, Axel, and their girlfriend. Again, I don't know her name. But there's not much to say about it. It happened 5 times. Not too much occurrences in the film, I guess.
Oh, bunch of clowns. Things haven't changed a bit. Same as always.
Hey, you wish you never came back. Especially now since Sam's going out with Axel.
So let's move on to rule number 8, which is whenever somebody says the name Harry Warden. This happened a lot more times than any other rule in the movie, which was 21.
Harry Warden spent the next year in the state mental hospital. Exactly 1 year later, on Valentine's Day, he came back to town.
And the only other rule that gave us double digits in the 20s was Screams, Cries, and Yells with 23.
Mm-hmm. Now moving on to the next rule, we have whenever you see a candy box, you take a sip. And that resulted in a total of 5 sips for this movie. It doesn't happen super often, but again, it's relevant to the plot.
Yeah, I'd say it's a big part of the plot. You don't get to see them all that often, like you said, but it's just, the times you do, they're impactful, they're front and center in the shot, and it's just a key piece to the movie, I'd say. Mm-hmm. Anyways, moving on to the last rule, which is whenever there's a slasher sin. It's a slasher movie, we gotta have this rule coming back, and this time it gave us 16 sips. And like we mentioned during the Scream franchise that we just finished up, obviously this is kind of a version of the Scream rules where there's no sex, no drugs, no saying, I'll be right back or else you're gonna die. So whenever somebody does those kind of things, you would take a sip for that. So it could be left up to interpretation in some cases, but generally speaking, you're going to get 16 sips from it.
Yeah. And that brings us to our total. And the total for this movie is 125 sips, which is the equivalent to drinking just over 4 standard 12-ounce cans based on our 30 sip per can scale.
Yes, and honestly, it kind of surprises me that it's not at least 5 cans, because it is a slasher movie, and it seems like slashers tend to be at least 5 cans, but 4 cans is still, it's a decent amount of drinks for a movie. I'd say for me, it's like a perfect amount for a movie. It's not way too much, it's not way too little, it's just right,
Yeah, I kind of also agree that 120 is probably the sweet spot for a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. And it's really weird to see a slasher movie that is good for drinks, which a lot of them aren't. Which would have made this very bad for drinks, is we considered the rule whenever you see a heart, but then we realized how many fucking hearts there were in a Valentine's Day movie, and we scrapped the rule because it was over 80.
Yeah.
And honestly, if we were to take out like any other rule, it would probably be over 200 still, so it's almost unacceptable.
And another point that I found that was kind of interesting for this movie was they actually used a real mine to film, which obviously puts up a lot of real life dangers when they're filming. Like, they have to use specific lights. They can't use certain lights because there's dangers involved with it. And like, obviously, just in general, being in a mine is a dangerous career or job, I guess.
Yeah.
So filming in an actual mine seems pretty risky to me, and I was just surprised to learn that they actually did use a real mine.
Yeah. I guess this is probably the perfect time to talk about the mine setting in a horror movie, which I feel is like brilliant. I feel like the idea of that alone is just a great setup.
I really liked it too, and you don't see it too often in horror movies. Obviously, there's some stories that involve a mine, like even Antlers in 2021 had a mine involved, but this one had a lot more shots in the mine, and you got to see them going through the mine and stuff, which was pretty neat to see.
It's just a lot of those movies are generally like, oh, it's an abandoned hospital, or it's a summer camp, or like a teenage house party, or cabin in the woods. But this one, a mine is just such a unique setting.
For a slasher. Especially.
I feel like another interesting element to the film is that the town was basically run by the young adults in it.
Yeah, well, at least that's what it seemed like from watching it, because they were the ones in charge of the mine, and I guess it's the characters we just saw the most. Obviously, like in the bar scenes and in the town in general, we saw a lot more of the adults trying to prevent them from throwing a party.
Forget about having a party at all on Saturday night. You may not live to see daylight. Laugh now. But you'll be sorry you didn't listen to me.
But for the most part, it did seem like the kids were the main, or the young adults, I guess you'd call them.
Yeah.
They weren't really kids, but young adults were running the town in a sense.
Mm-hmm. That's what I felt like too. But I feel like a lot of them are just forgettable.
The characters and the cast. Yeah, like, I agree. There was only a handful of characters that we really got to know anything about. And I guess that's kind of typical in slasher movies, especially from the 80s. You don't get to know the characters all that much. In this one, we got a little bit of backstory from TJ and a little bit of Axel, their girlfriend. Again, I don't know her name.
We still don't know her name. That's how forgettable the characters are.
But then there was, I guess, Hollis and Patty. Those are the only other two that I can kind of think of off the top of my head. Maybe the guy, the bartender. I don't know if he was ever named or not. I don't remember. He had a little bit of a backstory, and because he's just the town, what do you call him? The crazy town nut or something?
Yeah, the town nut who somehow actually has a successful business.
Yeah. Anyways, in general, the characters are forgettable, and I feel like that's just a trope at this point in horror slashers, like what Friday the 13th did. It's just a bunch of drunken, horny teens there to be killed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So they were kind of following that trend, I guess, that was going on at the time.
Yeah, they were basically trying to cash off on the exact same success as Friday the 13th, just trying to follow the formula to a T.
Yeah.
Teenagers go somewhere, have sex and booze, and all die one by one from making stupid decisions. I feel like that's kind of the formula they wanted to play.
Yeah. So I'm not too mad that there wasn't a lot of backstory for the characters, because I was going in expecting, a typical slasher movie.
Yeah.
So now that we got that all out of the way, what was your overall thoughts on the film?
I thought it was a pretty fun watch for sure. As any slashers are, just people there to kind of get killed. It did its purpose. Kills were great. It's an interesting setup for sure, especially being in a mine, and on Valentine's Day, those things don't really ever click. And I don't know how they came up with those ideas together.
It seems total polar opposites.
Yeah, but the main problem is just the payoff was so sloppy. Like Axel, it was sloppy, rushed. Axel being the killer just kind of didn't make sense to me at all. So I really wish it was somebody who had more of a connection to Harry Warden. But overall, it was a great kind of folklore film as well, with all the town people kind of being afraid of Harry Warden. Just the payoff didn't sit well with me.
That's fair. I think I like the payoff a little bit more than you. Like, obviously, I do agree it was rushed and it wasn't anything spectacular or anything, but I wasn't mad about it. I was like, oh, okay. To me, it makes sense that he was trying to avenge his father's death, but when it did reveal that it was him, yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't a great reveal, that's all. But I do agree, it is a fun watch. I think this would be a good movie to watch with a group of friends, and like, you know, it's a slasher movie. Slashers are kind of fun to watch with friends. But with any typical slasher movie, there's a lot of stupid characters, so it's perfect time to move on to the awards ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee, the Darwin Award. This award goes out to the character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have been easily avoided. This award can also be given to a character who is just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is the sheriff, for not telling the others in the way that Mabel died. If he wanted to stop the party, full disclosure on Mabel's death probably would have been the best way to do so. The threat of Harry Warden being back in town would probably be enough to deter teens from throwing the party.
Next is Hollis, for easily being influenced and taking others into the depths of the mind. This makes it easier for Harry Warden to pick them off one by one.
And finally, we have Patty. Patty is on the list because after Hollis dies, she completely shuts down and becomes a liability for the rest of the group. We get that your boyfriend died, but her actions could have caused everybody else in the friend group to die as well.
And the winner is Patty. This one is a bit up in the air, but she really didn't do anything to move the group forward to escape the mine. If anything, all she did was hinder them.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into My Bloody Valentine. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any other feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also, let us know in the comments what your favorite 80s slasher horror movie was.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next week's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for an even older horror movie, The Birds. If you want to check out our most recent video, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying, cheers to fears.
I'd say you have your answer. It looks like Harry Warden's back in town.